This episode of A Conversation with John Canena is sponsored by Generate. In today's digital age, staying ahead means harnessing the power of generative AI. Wondering how your small or medium-sized business can join this revolution? Look no further than Generate, your strategic partner for integrating cutting-edge generative AI solutions. We create personalized plans, adapting existing AI technologies to fit your specific business needs. Plus, our expert team provides essential training, empowering you to make the most of these innovative technologies. Interested in transforming your business with AI? Reach out to us at generateteam@gmail.com. That's generate, GENERAIT, team@gmail.com. And now, on with the episode.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Canena. Today, it really brings me great pleasure as we go down a different path this time in our interview process. We are going to talk today to Dr. Carla Knorowski. And of course, Carla is a PhD as a transformational leader with more than 35 years of experience and working with charitable sector institutions. Born and raised in Chicago, which is a great thing for us. And author Carla has written acclaimed books on the subject of Abraham Lincoln, yes. Gettysburg Replies, Under Lincoln's Hat, and of course, Lincoln, the Intimate Portrait. But the story today, and before we get into introducing Carla, is a beautiful book that she has written. The other ones were co-authored, but the one that she has written, Blessing My Mother's Rosary, Lord's Loss and Love. This is the book. It's a fantastic read. I just received it from Carla personally a couple of days ago, and this is truly a book that we're going to indulge into here for a little bit. Carla, as I look at my notes before I bring you in, what is going on with you, young lady, and how are you?
Well, I'm doing great. I hope you are as well, John. And I want to thank you for inviting me. A lot is going on, working at the Henry Ford, which is, as we know, a museum up in Detroit, but I'm still residing in the Chicago area, still working on raising the remaining funds needed for Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, which it opened in December, and I was happily there. But still a lot of fundraising going on there. And then, of course, as you pointed out, we're just so excited that Blessing My Mother's Rosary has come out. It's really a tribute to my mother.
Yeah, this is basically hot off the press, right, Carla?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is. And just so proud of it. It's a departure from what I've written in the past, which has been, as you mentioned, mostly about Lincoln, but it's a labor of love, and I'm just really thrilled that it's been published. So
yeah, fantastic. I have to ask you, are you a graduate of the University of Illinois?
Yes. So my family there's a long line of people in my family who went to the University of Illinois. All of us were first generation college attendees. Our parents were very learned, but had never gone to college, which was fine. You don't have to.
Right.
It's not for everybody. They were not able to because of the era in which they grew up, and they just needed to work for their families. But yes, so I attended UIC right in the city. I was there right after it transitioned from Navy Pier in 1965 over to the West Side in the old Italian neighborhood, which is where my mother grew up. She listed several different addresses. I think she was on Polk Street.
Polk.
She was on another one. I can't remember right now. She went to Our Lady of Pompeii, was christened there. She was married there.
Wow.
So I went to school there, and then I ended up working there at UIC. So on my lunch hours, I would walk in Arrigo Park, which they used to call Peanut Park.
Peanut Park.
Yes. And I would think about, this is where my parents were married. This is where, my mother was christened. So it really was a throwback for me.
Unbelievable. I remember that area very well. I've interviewed some people from that area. But I have to tell you, I remember the famous Cabrini Hospital on Polk Street.
Yes.
There were the three hospitals there in and around the area, Cuneo, Cabrini, and Columbus. You and correct me here because this was another fascinating thing about you. Just amazing career, amazing schooling that you had and everything. Are you also a graduate of Harvard University?
I'm not a graduate, but I am an alum
Alum.
of a program of theirs that is really a it's more of like a career type program, continuing education. So I didn't get a degree from them, but I did get a certificate in the colleges of higher education there in the management development program, which really teaches people how to serve in higher education administration positions. It was really an interesting program and very intense. I mean, we went from like 8 in the morning till midnight. I just had never been in a program like that, so it was a real
Wow.
privilege.
Yeah.
And some of the leaders at UIC had sent me there for that, so that was really great.
What
To,
an honor of honors. I have when you see something like that, that's fantastic. I mean, when I
it
saw that,
was, yeah,
very,
it
very
was an honor. It was an honor because those programs are very costly and quite frankly, I it was not something I'd be able to afford to do on my own. But I was grateful that my colleagues at UIC saw that I would benefit from it and sent me there.
wow, fantastic. And of course, I know you had brought up here just in a little I don't I have to stop to say something. If I could do this the way do you remember the old we'll date ourselves here, the
Yeah.
morning show Ray Rayner?
Oh my God, yes, I love
Yeah, well,
Rain.
I have to tell you, I should put these stickers like
Oh,
Ray did in the morning to remember all the things you have done and the things that you've accomplished before we get into the thing of the book. You also received the National Order of Merit of Paris.
yes. So that was quite an honor. So much like we have here in the United States, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, uh, in France, they have uh, one of the levels of the medal that they have is the National Order of Merit. Uh, and it was founded by Charles de Gaulle, I believe back in the 60s. He's also a recipient, but I was doing my job working one day and I was getting into a cab in New York City,
Wow.
the blustery day, so it was loud, the traffic was loud, the wind was loud, and I get this call that I'm going to receive the National Order of Merit. It was the
Wow.
French Consul General, and I was like, what? And I think I sounded so incredulous that maybe they thought for a minute that they shouldn't give it to me, like maybe we made a mistake, but really, they notified me that I was receiving it for, not only things I've done in my career here, but things that I did in France, most especially right after the fire. We put on a virtual gala because it was right in the midst of the pandemic, and we
That
raised.
was because I remember that because my business was affected majorly, or my travel agency. That was the fire of the Louvre. Is that correct?
That was the fire in Notre Dame
Notre
Cathedral.
Dame. Yes.
Yeah, that's started in the attic, or what they call the forest, because
Right.
it's all these wooden beams. And we all thought that the cathedral would be lost, which would have been just tragic because it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. People come from all different countries to see it for its architecture, its Gothic architecture. And it was like 860 years old of history in that
Sure.
cathedral that would be burning down if it had been lost. But as we saw back in December, it reopened and it's just glorious.
What
And
an incredible movement that you were a part of. I mean, just reading that too. I have to tell our audience before we talk a little bit more about you and the book. Um, Dr. Carla Knorowski has appeared on PBS, C-SPAN, CBS This Morning, and a host of other national, local news outlets. You've been a public speaker, featured speaker at the president, the meeting of the engagements, of course, of Notre Dame in France, and the unveiling also of the bust of the president of Abraham Lincoln,
Yes.
also there in Paris. I mean, just Carla, I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to need a part two before because I have to come back. This is just fantastic what you've done. I mean, and to see all these things, and I noticed one thing about you, just in the reading part of this,
Okay.
the time and the effort and the passion that you have for what you do. Am I correct in saying it that way?
Well, yes, thank you so much. I mean, that's it. I really don't take any task that I'm invited to participate in and I say yes to. I don't take it lightly. I am very serious about it. And, we only are given one life. And so, and my parents taught me to make it count, whatever I'm doing. If I'm like when I was in high school or college, if I'm playing softball, I'm giving it my all in the softball game.
Okay.
Uh, if I cleaned houses, put my, you know, put myself through college cleaning houses. I'm going to clean the house as best I can if I'm going to clean a
Right.
house. Whatever the task is, I just was taught to throw myself into it. And over time, I was very fortunate that some very interesting projects were availed to me, such as uh, you know, they wanted to there, we have this committee in Chicago called the Chicago Paris Sister Cities. Well, Paris has the Paris Chicago, and they reached out to me and said, we want a statue or a bust of Abraham Lincoln here in Paris.
Yeah.
And so it happened. It happened just this past May. And I know you have a lot of Park Ridge listeners.
Yes.
And so we worked together with the Kalo Foundation, which is on Northwest Highway in Park Ridge, and they provided us with the model for the bust of Lincoln.
Wow.
They housed a lot of the artwork of Alfonso Iannelli, who was an Italian American, and he did a bust of Lincoln. And so the Paris Chicago committee was lent the bust from the Iannelli Studios in Park Ridge.
Oh, wow.
And so if you can't get to Paris, and I encourage everybody, if they can, to do it and go to see the bust and rub Lincoln's nose for good luck. But if you can't get there, and even if you can get there, go to the Kalo Studios, the Iannelli Studios and the Kalo Foundation in Park Ridge on Northwest Highway, and you can see the original bust there.
Wow, that is fantastic to know. And again, that's the Iannelli Studios in Park Ridge. And is that on Northwest Highway?
Yes, it's on
Yeah.
Northwest Highway. And the goal of the foundation that is part of the Iannelli Studios is to preserve a lot of the landmarks in Park Ridge. Uh,
Right.
and so they do incredible work. And you can go into the studio and see a lot of Iannelli's artwork. And maybe sometime you'll have them on your show,
Oh,
John.
I think this is only going to help me by talking about this from you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let them know. And I just think that they do fabulous work. And if it were not for them, we would not have made the
Wow.
bust of,
Just
of Lincoln to put in Paris.
yeah, that is something to have this bust of Lincoln in Paris, France. I mean,
Yeah.
again, something that just caught my eye incredibly a year again. Real quick before I one last thing. Did you have a passion for Lincoln as the teenager in high school, the history, or was it in college? What hits the chord with you about Abraham Lincoln, our president?
Well, I think because I grew up in Chicago and I'm in Illinois and and this being the land of Lincoln, I just loved him from my earliest days of schooling. But when I was fortunate to be recruited to serve as the CEO of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation and raise money for the Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield. And so I really learned a lot about him there, and it really spurred me on to not just be a kind of an idle bystander, as I say, but really not just to raise funds, but to learn about him, to write about him, to help others become inquisitive about him, more so than what they generally know about him.
Carla, was it hard to get the information on Lincoln, even though, I mean, it's a little bit closer to our time than, say, other things that we go back to look for? Was it hard, but you were able to dig a little bit more about the president?
No, actually, it wasn't, because, and this is a proven fact. Like, if you go to the museum across from Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., there's now a museum there. You'll or no, the museum, I believe, I don't know if it's across, but it's right there.
It's nearby, yes.
Yeah, and you will see, I think it's like a 2 to 4 story stack of books. They've literally stacked them up.
Wow.
And they're all on Abraham Lincoln.
Incredible.
Abraham Lincoln, short of Jesus Christ and Napoleon, the person who the most books have ever been written about is Abraham Lincoln. So you could find, in fact, authors, experts on Abraham Lincoln are very hard pressed to find a new story about him that hasn't been told. So many times they'll take an old story with a new take on an old story. But it's very difficult to find new things about Lincoln because he's been so researched, and he always, is rated by experts and scholars as the #1 president in American history.
Unbelievable. I'm going to reach out again to our audience to tell. So under Lincoln's hat, the 100 jobs to tell the story of the life and the legacy of him, you co-authored that with James Cornelius?
Yes.
Yes.
And then
we have Gettysburg Replies.
I edited, and I also contributed to it. That book, I would encourage your audience, if they're interested in learning a lot of different perspectives on Abraham Lincoln. We produced that book for the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address, and we challenged people from all walks of life to write their own 272 words, which was how long the Gettysburg Address was.
Right.
And we did that partially to give them, let them feel how difficult it is to write something as profound as the Gettysburg Address in just 272 words. It's hard to express something in a few words, and also for them to express themselves on different topics of importance to them. But most of them referenced Lincoln in their discussions. And so we had all the living presidents at the time. They all contributed essays. Colin Powell, Steven Spielberg,
Wow.
Nick Giovanni, all these, Sandra Day O'Connor. And then we had students from Little Rock Central High School. And of course, that's where
people
9 desegregated schools in the United States back in the 1950s. So I think it's a book that people will really get a lot out of.
Yeah, I saw your interview with Phil Ponce when I was doing some research these last couple of weeks. That was fantastic on Channel 11 with you and Mr. Ponce about the Gettysburg Address. And of course, the last thing about Lincoln that I saw with you was the intimate portrait.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And that actually, when Time Life heard that we were getting all these essays from all these incredible people, they said, could we run some of them? So they picked a handful of essays and put it in their retrospective on the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's death. So you can also find a handful of essays there.
Fantastic. Okay. We're going to talk about our main focal point here today, finally, is the new book, Blessing My Mother's Rosary, Lord's Lost and Loved by Dr. Carla Knorowski. This is the book, again, I'm going to keep holding it up because this is a book that is a must read. And I'm going to tell you my favorite part is I've delved into it pretty quickly, but there's a favorite part in here that I love. I have to ask you, so you take a trip. Is it 1982?
Yes.
Okay. And you want to kind of elaborate what goes on there? Because you have this rosary with you, correct?
Yes. Well, and I'll just preface it with
Sure.
back in 1980, I was in college, and two of my friends, one actually said, "Hey, do you want to go backpack in Europe?" And I grew up in a family where if you were going to go to Europe, it had to be like your, you know, 25th wedding anniversary, or you just retired. It wasn't kind of a trip that we readily took. We were
No,
very modest in the trips we took. And
sure.
and I thought, well, how are we going to do that? But we did do it. And so in 1982, I decided to go back. And I was a little nervous about going because I felt like I really needed to get my career going and everything. But I had saved up money, uh, and I approached my father, and he was gung ho about it. But he said, you've got to talk to your mother. And she was always kind of, if there was anything that might be like considered dangerous or risky, we had to go talk to my mom.
Of course, we all did.
Yeah, and I kind of was like building up my courage, and I went in to go ask her if I could go. I was paying for myself, but because I was living under their roof, I knew
Sure,
I
sure.
still going to ask permission. And before I could even ask her, she came out of her bedroom and she had her rosary in her hand, and she said, "Hey, when you go to Europe, could you get my rosary blessed at Lourdes?" Which stunned me. Um, that she
Sure.
already, apparently my parents had already talked, even though I think my dad wanted to warn her so that she wasn't like totally shocked or apoplectic when I said that I wanted to go backpacking, because I was going this time, I was backpacking alone. And so it took a little bit more for her to say, there in her mind, there wasn't a safety net, but she handed me her rosary. And so, of course, I said I would do it. I knew that Lourdes was off the beaten path, but
Right.
I couldn't say no to my mother. And so I took the rosary and I embarked on a journey to get to Lourdes. Went to other places, but I did get to Lourdes, and couldn't find a priest, which I thought was shocking. But it was off season, and so the book really tells the story of what happens and how I finally get it blessed, and who I meet along the way. The trip was incredible. I was backpacking for quite some time, met some very interesting people. It was wonderful.
Right. I have to tell you, just the way you talked about mom and with the rosary and everything, that was a sign in itself, um, you know, to give you her blessing to
Yeah.
go. I mean, that just how when you said you had to find that way to get was it difficult? Because back in those days we didn't have the advent. Or I remember when working on trips, and of course back then in '81, when I was 21 years old, working on trips with my father, you used the map. It wasn't this quick little Google thing.
That was it. Yeah, absolutely. I had a map. I had a timetable, a bulky timetable that I had to carry for the trains. And that was the thing. And it was funny because when we were writing, I was writing the book and I was talking with my publisher. There was a section where I said, well, we made a phone call to try to find a youth hostel. And then I thought, oh, wait, we need to clarify that we had to find a phone booth, because younger readers are going to read this and think that we just pulled out our flip phones,
Yeah, the cell phone. Yeah.
from, those from the 90s, or those, people from now with their iPhones or their Androids or whatever, and that we just quickly made a call. No, we had to first get change. It was, we had to get French francs, then we had to go, find a phone booth, then nobody spoke English, which they shouldn't. It was France. We didn't speak French. So
Right.
it was quite an ordeal. It was pre all that technology.
Sure.
And so it was difficult. being a single woman, very young at the time, I always tried to get there to these cities while it was still light out. I had to find a place to stay. And finding a place to stay turned out to be like we might as well wanted to climb Mount Everest. We could not find
Right.
a place to
It
stay.
was not an easy time.
No, and you should understand, I mean, with
Yeah.
your travel agency and your background in travel, we just could not find a place. And so there's a little cute story in the book about how we looked for a place to stay. And I say we because I met up with a fellow backpacker, which often happens when you backpack.
Sure.
You end up, clinging to someone you find that's in the same boat, and you try to get through it together.
When you have this blessed, of course, how long was this trip? Just to go back to the trip for a second. How long was this trip? And by the time you got back in
It was
82?
about 3 months. So I
3 months.
yeah,
Wow.
I didn't spend the whole time in search of Lourdes, but
Right.
and I actually went back in 1989 and worked at Lourdes for about
Oh,
a
wow.
week, but a lot of people don't know that, but I did go back and work there.
Very
But
nice. So you bring this rosary back to mom blessed, correct? It's a blessed rosary.
sort of blessed.
So what do you mean by sort of blessed?
Well, I don't want to give it totally away, but as I said, we couldn't find a priest. So
Oh,
we kind of what we went off the cuff and thought, what was the next best thing to getting it blessed by a priest? So you'll find out in the book.
okay.
Without me giving it away.
All right, good. And this is great that we're going this route for our readers. And again, the read is what I love about the read. And of course, the number of the chapters here that we have. I think how many chapters is this book? I think we have the goodness gone,
Yes.
personal effects, leading a trail, no room at the inn, and we kind of dabbled on that one already, Carla. The City of Miracles, which I want to get into, off-season, mission accomplished, the gift, the epilogue, and of course, there's the thing about the author.
And if I may say,
Sure.
sometimes readers pass over the epilogue. Do not pass over the epilogue in this book. I beg of you not to pass over the epilogue because it really does end the book. Sometimes epilogues are extra and people say, oh, I'm not going to read it. This epilogue actually closes out the book. So it would be, you'd be missing out if you did not read the epilogue.
Right. And, good point by you. A lot of people sometimes don't read the foreword, don't read the epilogue, and there could be something in there that really touches. What I liked about what I saw so far in this book and the few things that I read to prepare myself for today was, boy, I felt like you just came back from the trip. There was a freshness to it and how you approached it. Do you feel you had that mindset when you were writing it?
Yes. So I find that, memory is a very precious thing. And, if you really want to relate to readers or to, if you're speaking to an audience or just one-on-one with somebody in a restaurant, you have to be very authentic and true to your memories. And, we're all storytellers. Everybody has a story to tell. And this story was particularly vivid to me because it was about my mother. It was about a trip I took that really left a very precious mark on me. It was even after her passing, I went back and really fulfilled my promise to her. And so it is very fresh because the memories are so vivid and the people I met along the way and the experiences I had along the way, it's like yesterday. They are so important to me that I just can't forget them. I think it's when people have a moment in time that really means something to them, they'll remember it the rest of their lives.
Perfectly said. Would you and mom talk about Lourdes a lot and the story of this trip, or even when you went back those other times?
Well, growing up, and growing up Catholic, and also growing up in a family that loved movies, my mother and I always would watch The Song of Bernadette when it came on.
Fraser Thomas Family Classics.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh my goodness. Here. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And
Never forget that beautiful movie. Beautiful.
yeah, it is a beautiful movie, and it was nominated for several Academy Awards. So it's not just us saying that we loved it because of its story or who was in it, but it was nominated for several Academy Awards. It was based on the book of Franz Werfel, who was a Jewish writer who was fleeing the Nazis during World War II and ended up going to Lourdes as a safe haven from the Nazis. And so, and I tell that story a little bit in the pages. But so my mother and I would watch The Song of Bernadette all the time. And then it was also that my mother had an uncanny resemblance to Jennifer Jones, who played Bernadette in the movie.
Oh wow! I was just going to ask you who the actress was. It was Jennifer Jones.
And I think it was her first role ever.
Wow.
Because she was so young. And so my mother and I would watch this movie together, no matter how many times it came on. We watched the movie together. And then of course I learned the story in school, and I came to, find out more and more from my mother what Lourdes, meant to her, including the fact that, the rosary was from Lourdes.
That's right. Wow. And again, Carla, about the book, the tie-ins, of course, the Lourdes that we're talking about, the mom passes in 2017, correct?
I, I'll be very honest with you. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah.
I focus on her life, not her death.
Yeah,
Although,
perfect.
as far as the year, I mean,
Yeah.
the actual death, I think of, and I think on, and what I've been told is that this book helps a lot of people who
Oh,
are grieving the loss of a loved one.
sure.
And certainly I was grieving the loss of my mother. And so the book is told in a little bit of retrospective of my mother passing away and then me thinking back on her life. Uh, so, yes, so it's about my mom and her passing and then my returning to Lourdes.
And yeah, and again, like I said, the Lourdes, the loss, the love, but the love, the everyday love that you bring up and the things that you remember and everything. And I have to tell you, because I had to I want to thank you for bringing the book. I want my audience to know that Dr. Carla Knorowski brought a book to John here at his office. I thought that was just, you talk about a class. That was amazing what you did for me. I have to tell you, there's a thing in the book that had the water coming out of my eyes. I think it's the miracles and like the miracles in this City of Miracles. I think it's in that chapter when the great Wally Phillips ran a promotion, and the promotion, whatever she won, and she was able to win that. And you woke up that morning and you heard the one-way conversation with her mother and the great Wally Phillips, who was part of WGN Radio, and she won. And I was going over the list of things that she won. And was there a car that she wanted into a Subaru?
Yes, and what was so it was just crazy. What this contest was, and he held contests every day, but they were usually more simple contests, and this was really a head scratcher. And she entered it, and she kept saying, I'm going to win.
Wow.
And one of my cousins was saying, Auntie Mare, there are thousands, like tens of thousands of people entering this contest. I'm like pleased that you're confident, but the chances of you winning are like so slim. And sure enough, she won. And this list of prizes goes on and on. And then of course he ends telling her that she won a car. And of course, at the time, I don't think anybody even knew that it was a car because it was a Subaru, and the Subarus had just come out. So
Right.
it was not a name brand that people were familiar with. So some people, I remember saying, they were asking me like, well, what's a Subaru? I said, it's a car, you
It's
know.
a car. Yeah, they were new to the American market.
No, they were not.
Oh, they were
I
not.
mean, they were new. They were new. I
Yeah,
thought, yeah,
yeah, they
yeah,
were
they
new to
were
the
new.
American market.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Nobody knew. And
you know,
so we certainly didn't know.
yeah.
And we have some beautiful family photos of him, kind of turning the keys over to her. And, it
You
was
know, and,
really
and
something
and then I
special.
saw names. I know she had to figure out some code that came out to be Dick Buckus and something else, the famous Chicago Bear. And then the part that I loved when I sold the old department store that everybody went to, Weebolts, was in there, and she won something from there. So,
Yeah.
I delved into it a little bit, and I was like, wow, what? And when you're in the other room and you hear, well, I won. I'm here, you won.
Oh my God. And actually, we have audio tape of her
Oh,
winning it,
wow.
that WGN so graciously and Wally Phillips provided. And in the background, you could hear my brother and you could hear me screaming
Dreamy.
because we're so excited. I mean, first we really didn't know what to make of it because my father's name was Wally. So we're hearing her saying Wally, and I'm assuming she's talking to my father. And then I hear her say I won, and I thought, oh my God.
Right. Carla, mom's name was Mary.
Yes.
Mary. And, wow, I mean, a fantastic thing. And I'm just going through this. I mean, some of the things that, like I said, you brought the love and the memories of this together. So about the blessing of my mother's rosary. I have to hold this book up again. We are visiting with Dr. Carla Knorowski. And this is the book, Blessing My Mother's Rosary, a book that just came out. And Carla, we can purchase this on Amazon,
You
correct?
can purchase it on Amazon or at the publisher, which is ACTA Publications, ACTA Publications. And one other thing I want to add about that contest that she won is that, when people think of Lourdes, and I worked at a high school at one point, and some students said, well, when you went to Lourdes, did you see people like throw their crutches down and start walking and things like that? And people oftentimes look for the very splashy miracles, of which there were only about 70 that has ever occurred at Lourdes in its more than 150 years of history. So it's not like those types of miracles happen frequently. But, when you think of my mother's experience in being able to figure out that little contest, and that it was her first entry, because you could enter as many times as you want, that it was her first entry that won, that these are little miracles that happen every day in our lives. And so, I really encourage people to look for the everyday miracles that come across your life, and be grateful for them. And I think the more you start looking for them, the more you'll see. There are everyday miracles going on around us, and they don't all have to be something as miraculous as being able to walk if you couldn't, or whatever the case may be.
Sure. Carla, again, perfectly said. I have to tell you this. As an ex-hockey coach here in the state, I coached hockey for many years.
Yeah.
Even after a tragic loss, or I shouldn't use the word tragic because there's nothing as a tragic loss, but a loss or an emotional game, I would always go into that locker room after dissecting that game with my players, and I would say, remember, out of every game, there is a silver lining. We have learned from this mistake, but there's a positive, and the way you put it, that comes out of everything. I want to read something to you, but I do want to tell the people, please do read that epilogue that she mentions. The goodness abounds goodness is the only investment that never fails. And that's, of course, Henry David Thoreau, for anybody who was studying English beautifully. But read that epilogue. Goodness abounds goodness is the only investment that never fails, is right underneath her epilogue chapter. I'm going to leave you with this. And again, like I said, I'm going to promote this book, and people will be watching this podcast, A Healing Remembrance by a Grieving Daughter, the book of the Blessing, My Mother's Rosary. Fantastic read. The little that I've read of it so far myself, and this is by Dr. Carla Knorowski. And I want to read something that really touched me because I was so into this person growing up when I was studying journalism at Loyola. A woman of faith, Carla Knorowski, has written a deeply felt description of her experience where the real meaning of religion can be found. I let her tell you what the miracle is. You will want to take the trip yourself. Bill Curtis, one of the greatest journalists in the world, who I idolized in the early 80s when I was at Loyola, a Peabody and Emmy Award-winning journalist. Dr. Carla, I want to thank you for this conversation today because this was fantastic. And young lady, you're fantastic. As I'm looking at you, I'm looking to the left. There's a beautiful picture of you by that bust there at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation. You're standing there with that bust, and it just shows the pride and determination you have when you look at that bust.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's very touching. And I've just thoroughly enjoyed this. I'm happy to come back for a part.
Oh, you're coming back. And if I got to come down to Lakeview to get you, you're coming back for a part 2 because this is fantastic. I mean, I'm really, if you don't mind, I would even, like I said, your book that just came out, but I would like to even hear more about President Lincoln and those books too.
I would love to. It'd be my honor. It would be my honor.
Okay, thank you very much. We have visited today with Dr. Carla Knorowski, just a fantastic read, author, just amazing work that she has done, philanthropist, just incredible, a transformational leader. Carla, please keep doing what you're doing. We definitely need more Dr. Carla Knorowskis. Good day, everyone, and thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
This episode of A Conversation with John Conena is sponsored by Generate. In today's digital age, staying ahead means harnessing the power of generative AI. Wondering how your small or medium-sized business can join this revolution? Look no further than Generate, your strategic partner for integrating cutting-edge generative AI solutions. We create personalized plans, adapting existing AI technologies to fit your specific business needs. Plus, our expert team provides essential training, empowering you to make the most of these innovative technologies. Interested in transforming your business with AI? Reach out to us at generateteam@gmail.com. That's generate, GENERAIT, team@gmail.com.